Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Graduate School One Health Emerging Infectious Diseases webinar series. I am Paola Gamboa, Education and Digital Manager of the Graduate School. Thank you for joining us for this new session in our series, One Health Research in French Amazonia, led by Professor Loic Epelboin. We are very happy to have you with us today. I'm glad to know you are joining us from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cambodia, Canada, Algeria, India, Romania, Colombia, Brazil, Sweden, Germany, French Guyana, and mainland France. I am pleased to introduce our chair for this session, Professor Loic Epelboin, our expert in infectiology and epidemiology of infectious and tropical diseases. He is a full professor and a hospital practitioner in the Infectious and Tropical Diseases Unit at Cayenne Hospital, Centre André Rosemont in French Guyana. Today, we are particularly happy to welcome Dr. Guillaume Odonne. On May 18, we will have in here Professor Antoine Adeny, and on June the 24th, Professor Paul Letournier. Remember that all our sessions take place at 12:30 p.m. Paris local time. Some quick reminders before we begin. The 40 minutes presentation will be delivered in English, but you are welcome to ask your questions either in English or French. We appreciate your contribution. Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat at any time during the talk or during the discussion period. When the discussion begins, you are invited to turn on the camera and to introduce yourself by sharing your name, your role, student, researcher, or other, your institution, and the country you are joining us from. Remember that the videos of the previous sessions are already available on the Graduate School website in the media section, webinar series entry. Well, for now, I wish you to enjoy the session, and Professor Epelboin, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Paola. Welcome to all the people connected from everywhere in the world. Someone put in the chat that there is also someone from Guyana, Georgetown. I think that it is the first time for us to have someone from there. So be welcome to our webinar. So I'm very pleased to go on with this webinar today. We've beginning several months ago with a great success. And I hope that today it will go on like that with my colleague and especially friend Guillaume Odonne, which is at the beginning of his life was pharmacist, but discovered another specialty. And so now he's also ethnologist. He's based in French Guyana, but working in many places in the world, such as Brazil, Peru, and he's going to work in many countries. And he's specialized in ethnopharmacology, tropical biodiversity. He's got many axes in his work, but some of this work focuses on traditional medicine practices and the use of plant-based remedies among local and indigenous population in everywhere in French Guyana and in the Amazon. So today will be a summary of several of his works, and as the title changed a few hours ago, and I couldn't pass it, I will let Guillaume give us exactly the title of his the new title of his talk. Guillaume, I'm very glad to be with you today, and I have to apologize also because normally I'm supposed to be all the webinar with you, but our congress, which is called the Days of the Scientific Works of the Health Worker of French Guyana, is beginning in 20 minutes, so I got to leave you. So, sorry so much, and Guillaume, the talk is yours now. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Loic. Thank you very much, Paola, for this invitation. I'm glad to present this work. It's not only my work, it's a bunch of my work and other anthropologists' work, trying to match humanities and health science. As you said, Loic, the first thing is to switch from the old title, which is an ethnomedicinal approach to major Amazonian diseases, and it's still currently the fact. But I decided to switch it to paying attention to the intricate human plant animal relationships in Amazonian local medicine, because I think it fits better with the One Health concept. So quickly, as Loic said it, I trained as a pharmacist, then as an ecologist, then as an anthropologist, before trying to mix all those disciplines into other interdisciplinary work at CNRS, the French Center for National Research. And my focus is the Amazon and the relationship between cultures and biodiversity in the Amazon.
Guillaume,
so briefly, yeah.
Guillaume, I'm sorry to interrupt. They are asking you to speak a little bit louder.
I'm not really sure I can
or
do
to
that,
raise the volume
but
of the
yes,
microphone.
I can try this. Let's see. Well, could you tell me if it works better if I switch to the headphones? Do you hear me better? This is the other microphone.
For me, it works, but I don't know if for the audience, they say yes.
Yeah.
They are saying yes. Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
If it works better for you, I'll stay with this one. So well, the talk is organized into 4 sections. One is a brief reminder of what is Amazonia and its perception as a mosaic of biocultural systems. Then we'll go through an introduction to ethnopharmacology and ethnomedicine, and path through 2 cases, one about cutaneous leishmaniasis and one about malaria. The case of cutaneous leishmaniasis is rather my work, and the case of malaria is rather work from colleagues and literature reviews. Well, briefly, oh, it's not working at all. Yeah, briefly, what is Amazonia? The Amazonian ecosystems are a bunch of ecosystems. Actually, it's not one forest. It's several. Well, do you see the little arrow on the screen?
No, I don't see it. Yes, I see it.
Okay. Well, so on the left of this picture, you can see the classic forest, what we call terra firme forest, which is what people think about when we say Amazon or Amazonia. But the mosaic of ecosystems in the Amazon is also made of flooded areas, white sand forests, which are actually a big part of the northern Amazon, and also rocky outcrops. To be quick, let's say that the Amazon is something about 25,000 plant species, of which 7,000 are present in French Guiana. And about, well, among these 25,000 plant species, we have 16,000 tree species. And, well, only 1,800 in French Guiana. I think it's rather the same number in Guyana, for example, as we have people from Guyana today. But Amazonia, what we call Amazonia, is a rather big geographical complex. It can be understood as only the river basin of the Amazon River, but we can also encompass other territories, other countries, and there is a difference between a legal Amazonia, an hydrographical Amazonia, a geological Amazonia, an ecological Amazonia, or a biocultural one. I would consider the biocultural one at large. So, talking about bioculturality, it's also the time to present a human Amazonia, because Amazonia is a territory of humans too. Today, we can count around 30 million people in the Amazon, and there were around 8 million before the Europeans arrived and colonized the countries, these South American countries. And people are there since more than 10,000 years. Well, there are debates between archaeologists that it's between 10 to 30,000, so it makes a lot of time. And among the people that we can find in this biocultural system, there are three, at large, are three different cultural groups rooted in different histories. So more than 300 indigenous groups, of which 200 are in Brazil, and of which around 50 are living in voluntary isolation, which means that they are still today refusing contacts with other people. There are what we call mestizo groups or métis, or, well, kinds of hybrid European, indigenous, and Afro-descendant groups, which, depending on the countries, can be called Ribeirinhos, Creoles, Mestizos, often living around urban centers and along the rivers, and Afro-American groups, which are originating from the transatlantic slave trade, and some of them were installed after the abolition of slavery, but some of them were also escaping from the slavery, which is the case, for example, of the Bushinengue in French Guiana and in Suriname. So from Brazil to Colombia and from Peru to French Guiana, there is a huge diversity, a huge cultural diversity. And this is what leads to our topic today. What does that have to do with health? My work is much about trying to understand how local healthcare, local medicinal systems integrate all the factors: territories, plant diversity, biodiversity, pathogen diversity. So in the Amazon, the local medicinal systems incorporates elements of the environment as causal factors. You will see that after. They involve social practices and imbalance between people and in their relationships. And of course, they incorporate plants, animal, mineral elements into therapeutic intervention. So on the one hand, we have this cultural diversity. On the other hand, we have this biological diversity, and that mix into complex biocultural systems. So let's turn to a brief introduction to ethnopharmacology and ethnomedicine. Actually, what is ethnopharmacology? To me, it's the study of this complex relationship between humans and their nosological landscapes. And if it can be seen as a discipline, it can also be seen as a mix of academic disciplines, of which we have part of anthropology, which interests into humans, part of medicine, of parasitology, epidemiology, which interests into pathogens, part of botany, ecology, and phytochemistry, which is interested into plants, and disciplines that are also studying interactions. For example, ethnomedicine is how people heal themselves in their own medicinal system. Ethnobiology is how people perceive and use the biodiversity. Pharmacology, that's about how medicinal plants or molecules can interact with pathogens. And, well, the point is trying to mix that up into something coherent. So to study local medicinal systems, we have to integrate diverse and complementary methodologies, which are some arising from social science and humanities, some from public health, some from experimental sciences. And the point is trying to better understand Amazonian healthcare systems. What I do rather call local medicinal systems what you will probably hear about as traditional medicine. I really don't like the use of traditional medicine because, for example, the biomedicine, the one which is taught at the university, also inscribes itself into tradition, into a long history of evolution of medicine, into, well, it also responds to a traditional definition. So to me, the main difference between biomedicine and these medicines that I am studying is the fact that they are local. So let's talk about local medicines. And my point is to try to draw parallels between emic perspective, which are the perspectives of the people with who I work, and ethic perspectives or biomedical perspectives, which are those understood by the common academic medicine. So, quickly, in the Amazon, and not only in the Amazon, in most local medicinal systems, according to local worldviews, we can find several categories of diseases. There are some illnesses caused by external forces. That's always tricky for us in ethnology to to allocate correctly illness and disease, but let's try to do it like this. Um, Illnesses caused by external forces, for example, when it's about shamanism, disease or illnesses that can be sent by spirits, be they non-human, like animal mothers. It's the direct translation of madres in Spanish, uh, kind of main spirits of class of animals. For example, there is the mother of the jaguar, the mother of the parrot, the mother of the tortue. I lost this word. Turtles, and these mothers are powerful spirits that can make people heal. There are some spirits, guardian spirits, places spirits, or just tricky spirits. Less important spirits that will just try to make you sick. And some diseases can also be caused by humans, and which is basically what we call witchcraft. If you're mad about your neighbor, or if you think something or it will harm you, you can just attack him in an invisible way. So most illnesses are caused by external forces, which are related to spirits or to spiritual forces. We can also find some what we call in anthropology natural illnesses, which are mostly the everyday ailments, minor things, insect bites, some animal bites. Of course, snake bites are often seen as sent by spirits or witchcraft attacks. So this try to categorize into to classificate into categories has some overlaps. And some illnesses are related to atmospheric phenomena. Rainbows, for example, are very powerful phenomena that can affect your health. And the last category is what we call or what indigenous people call European or white man's disease. A variety of explanation can be found, and these white man's disease are sometimes associated to a form of witchcraft, like white man's witchcraft. This is this is a common classification due to the fact that when Europeans landed into North and South America, they arrived with a lot of disease, viral disease, bacterial disease, parasitic disease, as we will see after. And this disease led to the extinction of nearly 90% of the human populations in the Americas in 1.5 centuries. So it was a major pandemic outbreak, probably the major the world knew or has experienced. So this deserve particular categories, which is this one, the European or white man's disease. But well, on another hand, if we want to try to understand how the diseases are understood in local medicinal system, we will see that we can have a historical, geographical, temporal, ecological, or social rationality, which means that diseases or illnesses are not only seen as a punctual thing, they are part of a wider, let's say, a wider landscape, which can imply, not necessarily, but can imply all these aspects. And this is what we'll try to see in the two case studies. So let's talk a bit about cutaneous leishmaniasis. This is part of my PhD research, which I made between Peru and French Guiana, and trying to fill the gaps between Peru and French Guiana, which are basically the Amazonian part of Brazil. And to do so, I had to do a thorough literature review. But let's talk a little bit about leishmaniasis. I suppose that most of you are familiar with the concept, but for the biomedicine, leishmaniasis is a parasitic disease, which is called by several species of the genus Leishmania, which is transmitted by sandflies in the Amazon, or at least in French Guiana, it's mostly genus Lodzomia, but there are several species involved, and it can cause skin ulcers like this. This one I think this one was from a soldier in French Guiana. There are several forms, visceral forms, which are not common in the Amazon, if not absent, and mucocutaneous forms. But I will talk mostly about the cutaneous form because it's the one which was in common between the Peruvian and the French Guiana's case studies I was observing. So this work relies heavily on this review we made a few years ago, which was part of my PhD, and it was it gathers references and case from all over Northern South America, except this part in Brazil and except Venezuela. Well, that's how it is. So the first question we had is, how do Amazonian societies, Amazonian control groups relate to this disease? And the first question is, do they know it as a disease? And it looks like yes, they know it because first, it's a pre-Columbian disease. And what tells us that it's a pre-Columbian disease? A part of genomics, because today we have some genomic insights that are clear about that. It's a very interesting point that some archaeologists understand this weird face on this ceramic as a fact of what they call in the Andes UTA, the mucocutaneous leishmaniasis. So it tells us, well, this ceramic is from the Moche culture, and well, way before the Europeans landed into South America. So, as a well-identified disease and nosological entity, it must have phytotherapeutical practices that are adapted to it. And this was also confirmed by the way that in many languages in the Amazon, we have some names for this disease, like particular names in their own language, which is a good way to know that it's not something that arrived recently, because in that case, we would have nearly the same name for the disease everywhere. If we have different names, it tells us that it's an old disease or an old concept. Well, I suppose that this slide is absolutely impossible to see, but that's not the point. The point was just to show you that there are diversity of names. And mostly, we can see that there is a good match between the emic definition and the biomedical definitions of this disease. It's a good match about the symptoms, about some aspects of the disease, rather not a good match between the emic and etic definitions of what gives you this disease. And this is what will be interesting for us. So that's what I called ethnoetiologies, because they are the etiologies, the causative factors perceived by the cultures. So, as I told you, sorry, as I told you, we can have different way of perceiving the disease, and in different cultural groups, they perceive the causative factors as different. For example, for the Matsigenka or the Shayawita, insects are responsible of the transmission of the disease. For the Matsigenka, it's Luciole, this light beetle, I don't remember the name. And for the Shayawita, it's a moth. Can be leeches too. For the Shayawita, the mucocutaneous leishmaniasis is transmitted by a moth, but the cutaneous one is transmitted by leeches. And in some part of Colombia, in the rural population of the Choco, cutaneous leishmaniasis is transmitted by the friction of lioness. So in this case, it's rather a toxicity of the plant, but for the insect or for the leeches, it's perceived that the animal gives you something, whether it's venomous or not. There is a notion of transmission. For some culture, leishmaniasis is perceived as originating from malevolent spiritual entities. It's the case in Bolivia with the Ecera. That's the spirit of a fish, a very little fish. And among the Yanesha, it's the spirit of the spirit of the disease itself. The Yanesha in Peru have a very particular worldview in which diseases have mothers, spirits that are related to the people, and we will talk about that for the case of malaria. And lastly, in the Choco in Colombia, it can be originating from social transgression. If you are not acting correctly in a balanced way in your village, for example, it can be a kind of punishment, like social punishment. So we can see a complex pattern of multi-species relationality, and this pattern is very interesting, because that's where we can relate worldviews or perception of the disease and practices. And once again, it involves animals, plants, practices, and it helps inscribe the disease into a complex a complex worldview mixing culture and biodiversity. For example, among the Chayawita, the signs of seriousness of the disease is the humidity of the ulcer and the depth of the ulcer. The fact that the ulcer is going a bit deeper every day. So they have therapeutic responses that are related to that. Humidity is fought with dried and ground plants. And if you eat peppers or if you eat salt, it will increase the humidity. That's a common analogical logic in most Amazonian cultures that what does something will do it even more if you are sick. So, for example, the chili peppers are making you sweat and cry. So it relates more. It relates much about body humidity, and it will even it will do it even more if you're healed. So it will increase the humidity of the outside. The question of the depths is related to these animals' mothers, animal spirits. If you eat animal that burrow, like the tattoo, um, tattoo, the English name, it's armadillo in Spanish, I think. The animals that excavate things. So if you eat tattoo, the spirit of the tattoo will help the ulcer to be even deeper. So you don't have to eat the meat from these animals. The same logical applies, for example, to the Ceira in Bolivia. And I told you that the disease is caused by the spirit of a fish. So the logical answer for the Ceira is using fish poisons. In the Amazon, there are quantity of plants used to poison the rivers to fish, and well, some of the most common plants are from the Fabaceae family, and Tephrosia sinapu is one of them. In Peru, they call them barbasco. In French Guiana, they call them nivre. And as the disease is caused by the spirit of a fish, they will use fish poison to heal the disease. Well, we can list lots of things, but for the YMP, one of the groups with who I worked, the sign of seriousness is the rapid growth of the ulcer. So they will choose fast-growing plants to heal that disease. And for example, Cecropia obtusa. So once again, the disease is related to animals, plants, and also, well, this is a bit far from the One Health concept, but in the analogical logics which occurs in the Amazon, there is also this temptation of trying to fight a cruel disease by cruel medicines, which is the title of a paper by Ramdas in Suriname. And it's a very interesting paper about the perception of leishmaniasis. So they will use, well, harmful substances to heal this cutaneous condition, but also plants that are well known for their toxic latex. So, well, let's switch to the malaria case. Malaria, the story of malaria, it's a bit different because it's a disease with various origins in the Americas. Probably most of you know that, but there is a rather recent introduction for Plasmodium falciparum of African origin, introduced during the transatlantic trade. But there is also a very likely introduction of pre-Columbian origin of Plasmodium vivax via Melanesian populations way before the European arrived. So described in this paper, which is super interesting. I don't know if it's big enough for you to see the reference, but I can stick them or somewhere in the chat after. So that's a disease that arrived more recently for most of the Amazonian cultural groups, but indeed they have it integrated into their worldview. So again, we can find in the ethnoetiologies this European disease concept for the Yanomami, and for them it's the smoke of the metal objects that transmit the malaria. And it's much related. It's in a way it's a good observation, if not the real smoke of the metal. But when white people were coming into village, they had a lot of axes, machete, and metal objects that they were offering to indigenous people. And then when they were leaving, people were experimenting malaria outbreaks. So for them, it was related to the smell of the objects, not from the biomedical perception of the transmission, but related to the presence of white people. But it's also a disease associated with plants in some part, for example, to the umari tree with the Desana. We'll talk a bit later about that. And with the Patawa in the riberinous population of Alto Rio Negro in Brazil. That's a palm tree, this one, which is edible and fat, and there is a frequent association between malaria and fat in fruits. This is interesting. I don't know why, but there is this relationship. This has to be explored a bit more. And it can be also seen, it can be seen, sorry, as a disease which is sent by malevolent spiritual entities, which is classical, as we've seen. So for the Yanesha, it's the spirit of malaria. For the Yanomami, for some it's this metal smoke, but for some it's Uraribe, which is also a spirit bound to white people. And as I told you, acting through the objects and their smoke, their fumes. For example, from outboard motors. So depending on the village among the Yanomami, it's just the metal smoke or the smoke from the motors that is related to a malevolent spirit. And for the Desana, it's also related to frogs. Umari, the tree, and frogs. The spirit of the frogs, obviously. And it can be also related to malaria pots. Well, malaria pots are places in the Desana territory where there are some big water holes in the river. We can imagine that there was maybe the reproduction of some mosquitoes, but this is not the point. I'm not trying to interpret too much the worldview, just trying to map them. That's so far the goal we have. Well, let's talk about the case of the Yanesha. It's the work of Céline Valado, well, a very, very interesting anthropologist that made a very good work about diseases among the Yanesha. And what she understood there is that the disease is related to the landing of Yonanietz, which is not the mother in that case, but the father of malaria. And he came in the mythical times to the village of the Yanesha to eat them as a monster. And so this disease is inscribed into the mythology of the Yanesha under the form of Yonanietz. But it's not only this historical rationality, which is interesting, it's also the geographical or the territorial rationality. the Yanesha have a malaria rock in their worldview. And this malaria rock is the place where Yunanites, this father of malaria, decided to stay after having killed all the village, all the people in the valley of the Yanesha arrived, where the Yanesha lived. And interestingly, he came with three friends. The Rougeole, well, I've got absolutely no idea of how to translate this in English, but Rougeole, variole, and fièvre hémorragique. I suppose that some of you will understand. But well, the interesting point is that all these disease came together at the same time in the medieval time, which is probably associated to these outbreaks that arrived along at the same time of white peoples. And another way of understanding the disease is to locate it into an ecological rationality. And this is what we can do with this plant. Odonne sopar, which is a begonia, has been given by Yunanites himself, by this father of malaria, because he was, well, understanding that he had killed everyone. He had to do something with the last survivors. So he gave them this plant, and this plant and a bunch of plant, which is also a very interesting part is that giving this plant, Yonansopan, and all the Yonansopar plants, and well, all these plants can be organized into a system. So it means that the disease, which has a historical relationality, an historical inscription, and a geographical inscription, can also be used to organize the plant world in the Yanesha society. So talking about malaria, you can also talk about plant classification, about geography, about history, and this is amazing. So, well,
Guillaume,
yeah,
just a sweet reminder, you have 5 minutes left.
cool. I think I will end in probably 2-3 minutes. So, well, let's switch to the Desana perception of the disease. For the Desana, the disease is called Dibakiri, and it's associated to frogs. I won't pronounce it that because it's probably too complex to be done correctly. But these frogs are so far unidentified. The interesting point is that these frogs sing only twice a year, in early December, when the umari tree is blooming, and in March and April, when the umari tree is ending this is fruiting. So it's related to the croaking of a frog and to the temporal sequences of this tree. And in the Desana worldview, there is a myth that links all this flowering of the tree, harvesting of the fruits, croaking of the frogs, and of course the onset of malaria. And it's a very fatty fruit. So once again, there is this question of what do we do with this texture, and don't know yet, but that's something. But well, it's about a temporal relationality and a multi-species relationality. Frogs, trees, disease, period of the year, and all this is, to me, well, at the core of the One Health concept. And well, I think I will quickly pass those two last slides, which are about the way that, now we can try to understand therapeutic hybridization between these worldviews and the biomedical ones. But, well, let's say that, well, hybridization are fairly common. And for example, for the malaria treatment in Saint-Georges, we've observed that there are many people using biomedical treatments, little people using local treatments only, and most of the people using both biomedical and local treatments, which means that these perceptions, the therapeutic answers are still complex and still inscribed into local worldviews. The last slide to finish this talk is, well, if you're interested to go a bit further into trying to understand how local medicinal system can be seen as well, can be seen with the One Health perspective. This paper, the last one, talks about a concept which is the medicinal keystone species. And we are trying to, a keystone is a stone in an architecture that holds everything together. And the concept of medicinal keystone species is something that proposed that some species, plant species, animal species, are so important in local medicinal system that it will help you to understand everything around the way this medicinal system works, how they relate to the ecosystem, to biodiversity around, to cultural systems. And it can be a good point of entrance into the understanding of a system. Well, I will leave you with that. You will have the reference in the slides after. And I'm happy to get your questions.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for this very interesting presentation and for showing us the relationship, how it's complex to understand this relationship between the cosmovision of the population in the Amazonian region and all these health aspects, which are really intricate and help us to understand how to prepare to respond to the health issues needs to help us understand and prepare how people see health and sickness. You have already some questions in the chat, but I just want to invite the participants to also use the oral ways to communicate. So do not hesitate to turn on your camera and ask your questions directly to Guillaume to make it this interaction really dynamic.
Well, should I start with the question in the chat?
Yes,
or?
we already have one related to some images you use. So it's about, in French, curieusement, la statuette évoque plutôt un pox virus. Donc, et ça, c'était l'une des premières diapositives.
Well, I will just say that I have no comment on that. It's the theory they have in this paper, and to me, it's, well, kind of an interesting information, but I will maybe offer you to review the paper, and if you think it's not consistent, maybe propose something else. But an interesting point is that there are several health conditions that are figured into ceramics in the whole coastal antique ceramic in Peru. So I think that there is a work, an interesting work of archaeoepidemiology to do yet.
And also, if Eric Ledru is also interested, he can give us some information about it in order to discuss it in this precise moment. If not, you have another question in the chat from Anasia Smith. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes,
you...
is the harmful
okay.
substance created measure across the Amazons or indigenous to one specific country for leishmaniasis? Harmful substance created measure across the Amazon. No, I suppose that it relates to this harmful cruel disease, cruel medicine slide. It's something I've seen in several countries, in several places. So yes, in a way, I think it's common across the Amazon, but I don't really know if there is a rationale behind this. Um, well, actually, the fact that some very chemical substances like battery acids, corrosive substance, or natural toxic substances like latex or plant juices that are known to be super irritating are used the same way through the Amazon. Questions me, but don't know really what to do with that. Well, to some point, as the cutaneous leishmaniasis, but for this I will refer to the dermatologist. I know that there are some in the community today. The cutaneous leishmaniasis is a disease where the leishmania goes into the macrophage to multiplicate, and might be to some point that creating an over irritation might, well, no idea.
So remember, feel free to turn on the camera to ask your questions directly.
Any other question?
Yes, if we don't have questions for the moment, because sometimes our participants are a little bit, hesitate a little bit. You can also take this opportunity to complete something you wanted to say. I know, for example, that you skipped 2 slides because we were checking the time.
Well, yes. One of the thing I will come back to the not the slide I skipped, but to the very last one, to this one. To me, this paper was an interesting, the first one of the two last, was an interesting opportunity to think about how what this concept we call One Health, which tries to relate plant health, animal health, human health, is very intricate into local medicinal systems, which, as I tried to show you, do make relationships between the plant world, the animal world, the spirit world, and for many diseases, that's very clear that everything is understood as a global and contextual situation. So in local medical systems, it's probably the difference between biomedicine and most of the local medicinal systems. Biomedicine integrates the body, and it's about balance into your own body. The things that have to be corrected are physical constants, but it's the body is the center of the attention of the physician, and the balance that have to be corrected, the imbalance that have to be corrected, are seen in the body of the person. In most local medicinal systems, it's not the imbalance into the body, It's the imbalance between the body of a person and the rest of the world. Let's say, for example, the social imbalance, or disrespect with animals when hunting, or about respecting some planting or harvesting conditions. So instead of a personal balance to be reestablished, it's a global balance to be reestablished. And this to me relates much to this One Health concept, where all these plants, animals, people, health is related. So it can be a perspective maybe for some of you interested into deepening their understanding of local medicinal systems.
Well, I have a question on my own. And in this understanding of the medical system and this relationship you just presented, how medical authorities respond to this type of research? Are they taking it into account?
Well, depend of the context. The for example, the Brazilian government is trying to reinforce some aspects of this research to improve basic health in remote communities, and it's a very important point. The French Guyanese or French government is not that much into that, but luckily in Cayenne General Hospital, we have the luck of having many practitioners paying attention to that. So it's not the national system that wants it, but several individuals that are trying to make this move. And well, I want to acknowledge them, because sometimes it's a difficult position to have as the representative of biomedicine in the hospital, to be able to make a step aside and say, okay, there are different perception of the world. People might have different perception of the body and different perception of the disease. Let's be open to try to heal better, because at the end, that's the goal.
Well, thank you. Well, I don't know if our participants are eager to ask some questions in the chat or directly to Guillaume. Well, if it is not the case, we are going to end our session for today. I will say again, thank you very much, Guillaume, for this very, very interesting presentation, for helping us understand how your research treats these representations on health and the relationship between animal health, human health, and environment. And even if Loic is not with us, I want to thank him for putting us in contact with you and having access to this very good quality research. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us today for this webinar series. We will have next week on the social sciences series. We will have Professor Christos Linteris. And like for today, the next week series will be also in English and at 12:30 p.m. Thank you all and see you next week. Thank you very much. Guillaume, I don't know if you have some closing words.
Well, thank you very much, Paula, and thank you to all the people that were assisting to this meeting. Thank you for your comments, and hope it will be it will fuel your imagination and wish for more integrative medicine. Bye.